Alright, today we're going over page p14, 2 to 24 even. Remember guys, with inequalities, this symbol right here means less than. Right here means greater than. With the bar, it just means less than or equal. And or it means greater than or equal. Now, important, we're going to need a number line. So on our number line, that's going to be an open circle. And if it's got the bar, it's going to be a closed circle. We're still going to use PEMDAS backwards. And then everything else, it's just like solving equations, except you're going to have a number line. Alright? Alright, number 2, we have a plus 7 is greater than or equal to negative 5. So I'm going to use my PEMDAS backwards. And one thing I did not mention that I should have mentioned before, the only other big rule is you flip the sign. So that's a big rule. Flip the sign when you multiply or divide by a negative number. Alright? So, PEMDAS backwards, there is no subtraction. I see addition, that's why I'm minus 7 from both sides. I get a is greater than or equal to negative 12. Now, just because I subtracted, and just because I have a negative answer, you still don't flip your inequality. It's only if you multiply or divide by a negative. So just because you subtract 7 from both sides does not mean you flip the inequality. So a is greater than negative 12. You're going to make a number line. I want negative 12 on your number line. I like putting 0 on there. I'm going to make it an open circle, or it should be a closed circle because it's got a bar. And then I shade to the right. So I shade to the right, put an arrow there because it goes on forever. Now look, 0 is on our shaded side. So when I plug in 0, it should work. 0 makes the a go away. So I'm just doing my check step right here. 7. It should be greater than or equal to negative 5. And that's true, which means I shaded on the right side. So it's good. Alright, number 4 is negative a. It's an a if you can't see. I know it kind of looks like a 9. Negative a over 8 is less than 5. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that 8. So just PEMDAS backwards. I'm going to multiply. So there is no subtraction. Even though I see a negative sign, there's no addition, there's no division. Or there is division, that's why I'm going to multiply by 8 on both sides. So multiply by 8, multiply by 8. I get negative a is less than 40. Now I want to get that negative sign away, so I have to divide by a negative. So that is divide by a negative. So that's why I have to flip this inequality to a is greater than negative 40. So I make my number line. I put negative 40 on there. I always put 0 too, just so I know where 0 is at. It's an open circle. And guys, if your variable's on the left, like it is here, this inequality will actually point. It's pointing to the right, so I shade to the right. Like I said, I usually make a scribbly line so you can see it. And there we go. So that means if I plug in 0, it should work. So I'm going to plug in 0 to the original problem. So I'm going to get negative 0 over 8 should be less than 5. Well, 0 is less than 5. That's true. All right. So that means I shaded the right side. Alright, so number 6, I have a over 11 is less than or equal to 8. Once again, PEMDAS backwards. There is no subtraction. There's no addition. I see division, so I have to multiply by 11 on both sides. So I get A is less than or equal to 88. And I'm done because A is already by itself. So now I'm going to make my number line. Now you can put a whole bunch of numbers on there, but I'm just going to put 88 and 0. I know it's a closed circle. And I shade to the right. All right. And just to check my work, it means 0 should work. So I'm going to plug in 0. I get 0 is less than or equal to 8, which is true. So this works. All right, number 8, I have m plus 14 is greater than 10. So PEMDAS backwards. Again, if you're lost, that's the first thing you do. Put PEMDAS backwards. No subtraction. There's addition. That's why I'm minus 14 from both sides. Remember, subtraction. This is subtracting. So I don't flip. I don't care that a negative 4 showed up. I only flip if the work is if I'm dividing or multiplying by a negative. So subtraction, I don't do that. All right. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in my number line. Negative 4 is right here in the middle. I'm going to put 0 over here on the right because it's bigger than negative 4. I'm going to put open circle because there is no bar. I'm going to shade to the right because the inequality is pointing to the right. And that means 0 should work. So when I plug in 0, I get 14 is greater than 10. That's true. That's it for number 8. All right, number 10 has 2 variables. So I want to get one variable before I do PEMDAS. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to minus 4t from both sides. So the t's are on the same side. So I'm going to end up with 2t minus 10 is greater than or equal to 0. 4t minus 4t is 0. So now I can do PEMDAS backwards. So I didn't do PEMDAS backwards right away because I wanted to get all the variables together. Now I do PEMDAS backwards. I get rid of the subtraction by addition. I get 2t is greater than or equal to 10. I divide by 2, divide by 2. I end up with t is greater than or equal to 5. I make my number line. I put 5 in the middle. I put 0 on the left. It's a closed circle. And it's pointing to the right, so I shade to the right. So this means that if I plug in 0, it should not work. So I'm going to plug in 0. I get negative 10 is greater than or equal to 0, which is false, which is exactly what I hoped. Okay, then it shouldn't work because I didn't shade that side. Right, that means number 10 is good. All right, so number 12, 4c plus 23 is less than or equal to negative 13. Since I already have one variable, I immediately just think about PEMDAS backwards. I see subtraction, so I minus 23 from both sides. I end up with 4c is less than or equal to. I'm going to flip that because of the negative 23. 4c is greater than or equal to minus 36. Now I divide by 4. And I get c is greater than or equal to negative 9. Last thing I'm going to do is make my number line. I'm going to put negative 9, open circle, and I'm going to shade to the right. So I shade to the right, and that's the side 0's on. All right, and that's it for 12. All right, 14, I have x minus 6 is greater than or equal to 3. So PEMDAS backwards again. Get rid of the subtraction first, that's why I add 6 to both sides. I get x is greater than or equal to 9. Make my number line, put 9 in the middle, 0's on the left, closed circle because there's a bar there. I shade to the right. So, I mean 0 should not work. So if I plug in 0, I end up with negative 6 greater than or equal to 3. That's false. That means I shaded the right side. And that's it. Alright, number 16, I have one variable already, so it's just PEMDAS backwards. I don't see any subtraction, even though it's a negative p, that's not subtraction. Think of that as a negative 1 in front of the p, so multiplication. No addition. There's division. See that? Divide by 5. So to get rid of that, I'm going to multiply by 5. I get negative p is greater than or equal to 70. Now to get rid of that multiplication or get rid of the negative sign, I divide by negative 1. Since I'm dividing by a negative, I have to flip this inequality. So that greater than has to become less than or equal to. I end up with p is less than or equal to negative 70. So now I have to make my number line. I'm going to put negative 70 in the middle. I'm going to put 0 on the right. I'm going to make a closed circle because of the bar there. And it's pointing to the left, so I'm going to shade to the left. If the variable's on the left, it points, this inequality right here will point which way you have to shade. Now that means 0 should not work. So when I plug in 0, it should be giving me a false statement. I plug in 0, I get 0 is greater than or equal to 14, which is false, which means that I think I shaded the right side. All right, number 18, we have negative 4h is greater than 36. So once again, PEMDAS backwards. That is not subtraction. That is a number in front of a letter, so it's multiplication. I divide by negative 4. Since I am dividing by a negative, this greater than has to flip to less than. I get h is negative 9. I make my number line. I put negative 9 in the middle. I put 0 on the right because 0 is bigger. It's a less than. It's an open circle, and it's less than. So that means, guys, when I plug in 0, it shouldn't work. So I'm going to plug in 0. I plug in 0. I get 0 is greater than 36, which is false. So that means I'm pretty sure I did it right. All right, number 20. A lot of people don't like number 20 because it's got some fractions in it. But if you don't like those fractions, you can multiply by 3 by everything to start. I'm just going to ignore that right now because PEMDAS backwards. A fraction is division, and I know I'm going to get rid of that addition first anyhow. So no matter what, even if that wasn't a fraction, I still have to minus 1 first from both sides. I end up with 8/3 t is greater than negative 6. All right. I'm going to get rid of the division, which means I'm going to multiply by 3. I end up with 8t is greater than negative 18. And now I'm going to divide by 8. I end up with t is greater than negative 9 over 4 or negative 2.25. So t is greater than negative 9 over 4, or maybe you put negative 2 and a fourth. Now I'm going to make my number line. I just put negative 2 and a fourth in the middle. 0 is going to go over here. I know it's an open circle. I know I'm going to shade to the right. So that means when I check my work, 0 should work. So if I plug in 0, I get 1 is greater than negative 5, which is true. So it means I'm pretty sure I shaded on the right side. All right, number 22, I have negative 3n minus 8 is greater than 2n plus 7. Remember, I'm going to make one variable before I use PEMDAS backwards. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do minus 2n. I get minus 5n. Actually, I'm not going to do that. I want to show an example where maybe the variable doesn't end up on the left. So I'm actually going to add 3n to both sides. So this problem, if you do it this way, you won't have to flip the inequality because you're dividing, but some different stuff will happen. So I get negative 8 is greater than 5n plus 7. Now that I have one variable, I can do my PEMDAS backwards. I'm going to minus 7 from both sides. I get negative 15 is greater than 5n. I'm going to divide by 5. I get negative 3 is greater than n. Now, I'm going to put the variable on the left. So n and negative 3. Now, if you look here, n, the Pac-Man guy is eating negative 3, so he has to keep on eating negative 3. So although it looks like a flip, I really didn't flip the inequality, I just rewrote it. So I rewrote, not a flip. But it kind of looks like a flip. So I put negative 3 here. It's an open circle. I'm going to shade to the left. All right. I put 0 on here. 0 should not work, so when I plug in 0, I get negative 8 greater than 7, which is false, which means I'm pretty sure I shaded on the right spot. All right, 24. I'm going to multiply everything by 5. And this is what a lot of people who don't like fractions will do, is they'll multiply everything by 5. So I'll multiply this by 5, this by 5, and this by 5. I end up with negative 4k minus 17 is greater than 11. I'm going to add 17 to both sides. I get negative 4k is greater than 28. I'm going to divide by negative 4. And since I divided by a negative, I have to flip it. I end up with k is less than negative 7. Make my number line. Get negative 7. Open circle. 0 is on the right. I'm going to shade to the left because the inequality is pointing to the left. And that's it. And that's it for this section. And guys, there are 2 mistakes in this video on purpose. Please try and catch them.